Thank you, Rich. I am joined today by two people, definitely a horse in this race on this issue, and I'm going to introduce them to you now. We have Representative Justin Humphrey, who's a Republican from Lane, Oklahoma, and we have Wayne Pacelli, who is the president and founder of the Animal Wellness Action Organization. That is a national organization. I'd like to thank both of you gentlemen for joining us.
Proud to be here.
Glad to be with you.
All right. One of the reasons we're doing this, and I'm going to start with you, Representative Humphrey, is you're proposing to make cockfighting a misdemeanor. Now, right now, cockfighting is a felony in the state of Oklahoma, correct?
Yes, it is.
So what would your measure do and why?
Well, here's the reason why is because we passed a bill called 780 and another bill 781. It was a state question. And what it did, it reduced a lot of crimes to misdemeanor. And so basically heroin, fentanyl, methamphetamine, all of these, if you go out and rob somebody for about $1,000, I think, all misdemeanor, and yet fighting a chicken is still a felony punishable by 10 years. That seems way upside down to me. I am a big proponent of criminal justice issues. That's what I've came mainly up to the Capitol to work on. And so I believe that this is a real upside down issue. And if you believe in criminal justice reform, then I think you ought to be supportive of what we're trying to do.
All right, Mr. Pacelli, I want to come to you. Lay the groundwork. What is involved in cockfighting? And I want to talk about globally because, the animals that are raised here do not stay here, correct?
Well, there is fighting in Oklahoma. We identified Oklahoma as the cockfighting capital of the United States, in spite of a strong federal law that voters approved by substantial margin in 2002. So it's been on the books for 2 decades. Every state has prohibitions on dogfighting. Every state has prohibitions on cockfighting. It's a felony in just about every state. It's also a federal felony. And listen, I really appreciate Representative Humphrey and his efforts on criminal justice reform, but there's a distinction between certain crimes, especially, marijuana and some of the drug-related issues, and crimes of violence. This is a crime of violence. We're not talking about allowing dog fighters to just get a penalty of $500. There's no moral distinction between dogfighting and cockfighting. The law treats them similarly in just about every state in the country. It's a felony in just about every jurisdiction. And at the federal level, dogfighting and cockfighting are the same penalties.
Representative, what do you think about the comparison between cockfighting and dogfighting? Is dogfighting fall under the same arena as cockfighting in your estimation?
Not in my estimation. Again, a lot of people don't understand animals. A lot of people have great intentions, and I always hats off people who want to protect animals. But a lot of people do not understand the difference between a dog. You would have to make a dog mean. You would have to train a dog to kill like that. Whereas these chickens, they'll do it. In fact, you can't keep them from it. And that's what they do. It's a natural thing to them. And so again, that's one of the issues on this. The other thing, Wayne, you make some valid points, and again, but here's where I'm at. Roughly, I looked up about 798 people died of overdoses in Oklahoma. That's not nationwide. We've seen a surge in fentanyl pills since we're having the border issues. And again, about 798 people. A lot of that's mixing fentanyl with methamphetamine. And so we're talking about real crimes that cause death to individuals, to people, not to chickens. And if those are going to be misdemeanors, you know what? I'm pretty certain that I'd rather see those drugs be a felony and this be a misdemeanor as what it is right now. And I think most Oklahomans agree with that. And I think the things that we're trying to do with criminal justice to set everything even and to make matrix where if you continue in crimes, then it's progressively more on those criminals.
I'm not really here to debate criminal justice reform, but obviously with drugs, a lot of people have said, well, let's just not incarcerate people. Let's get them treatment. Let's get them in a place where they're not abusing drugs. and incarceration may not be the answer for everybody. But when it comes to animals, we have all the power over animals. These are all God's creatures. They all feel pain like we do. To stage a fight intentionally, to attach knives or curved ice picks called gaffs to the bird's legs, which is what happens in cockfights, to expedite the fight, to kind of allow it to reach its conclusion sooner, and to have bloodletting, all for gambling. It's often tied in with narcotics use. This is something that our society, including Oklahoma voters, have said we don't want. Oklahoma voters knew what they were doing when they passed strong penalties in 2002. The world has changed in terms of awareness about animals much more favorably in these last 2 decades. So if anything, we should be doing more robust enforcement. Oklahoma has a ton of illegal cockfighting. We should be stopping it. If Representative Humphrey and others can help us enforce the existing laws, and then we basically eliminate it, then we can talk about criminal justice reform. But people are ignoring the law now, and they're doing so in Southeast Oklahoma and in Southwest Oklahoma and other parts of Oklahoma. It needs to be stopped. It's animal cruelty.
Representative, let me ask you real quick. Are current laws being adequately enforced, do you think?
I think that's a real indicator that people really don't care about this, because most of your sheriff's departments think it would cause them harm to try to enforce that, as well as if you win.
Why would it cause them harm?
Because when you go to these rural districts, these rural areas, most people aren't opposed. If you look at why that bill got voted, why that state question got voted, it's all in the urban areas. And if you looked at any state question in Oklahoma, generally the rural areas are opposed and the urban areas carry that. And if you looked at that bill that passed that state question, I couldn't go in and file this bill that I'm working on had that been set by state question. So if the criminal charges or felonies and all that had been set by that state question, then I would not be able to go back in without changing that by a state question. So the state did that, so we can go back in and we can settle that. And again, that's the way the government works. I mean, if I can get a majority of people to agree with me and they represent a majority of the people of the state of Oklahoma, then I think that we can represent the state and get their wishes in that.
Well, so I agree that Representative Humphrey is following a proper process. I mean, it's a statute, the legislature has authority, but I think the people should be given deference. This was a ballot initiative, a vote of the people. It passed overwhelmingly in the state. Yes, some counties, including in his area in Southeast Oklahoma, did oppose it, but I think there was a lot of other stuff going on. I don't think the people who voted against it were necessarily voting for cockfighting. There were a lot of other things going on in that vote. And now every single state in the United States outlaws this activity. The vast majority of them treat it as a felony. And I'll say the federal government also bans cockfighting, and Representative Tom Cole, Representative Frank Lucas, who represent rural areas, they support the felony. When this passed, the governor, Frank Keating, a Republican, was an outspoken supporter of this. Jim Inhofe was a supporter for felony level penalties. So Republicans were in the vanguard of supporting this effort. And I think that's just consistent with a tough on violent crime policy. This is violent activity. Animals are being harmed just for people's amusement. It's one thing if, animals are injured in, a roadkill or some other circumstance that's not intentional. This is premeditated. People are fighting animals just to watch them hack each other to death. And I just don't think that the people of any county, of all 77 counties in Oklahoma, think that's okay.
Representative Mr. Pastelli characterized it as watching animals hack each other to death. Is that the way this is seen in the arena of those that participate in cockfighting?
I think that people who are opposed to it are going to set it up like that. Again, I hear things set up against that people shouldn't touch elephants. I hear people shouldn't go to rodeos. Some of the same group are going to talk about using spurs on bulls and, on horses and doing these kind of activities that we've grown up in rural Oklahoma doing. And so we're just at a very, very different view, which is always great. And I appreciate the chance to get to talk and to let everyone hear the different sides of the views that we have. But rural Oklahoma, I can tell you, I don't believe that I wouldn't come out in big support of this and it be as publicized if I thought rural Oklahoma wasn't supporting me in that. I can tell you one thing I'm known for is I go back to my district, I check my district, and I'm gonna represent the majority of people in my district. And I believe that's what I'm doing. Always gonna be a few that disagree with me, and that's okay. Can't represent everybody. But here's the issue. It's an urban issue versus a rural issue, and that's what it turns into. And unfortunately, the urban area most of the time wins when it comes to state votes such as 780, 781, cockfighting. And if you want to see how it affected the, one of the biggest things that I can remember is Steve Largent was picked to be the governor, and Brad Henry won that race just because of their stance on chicken fighting, and Brad was on the side of chicken fighting, and it won him the race. So
well, you
I
did
think
have,
that's
I do understand that there's that view, but let's just remember in 2002, Frank Keating, a Republican, was the governor. He said, for the reputation of the state and to stop animal cruelty, we need to embrace it. Drew Edmondson, the Democrat, was the attorney general. He endorsed it. Tom Cole was his first race representing Southwest Oklahoma. He endorsed it. Jim Inhofe won in that race. He endorsed it. So I think that lots of successful rural politicians, and Oklahomans know animals, right? Rural Oklahomans know animals. Nobody who's a rural person thinks it's okay to mistreat an animal. This is a staged fight where animals are killed just for amusement. That's not proper. Rodeo's legal. Hunting is legal. Cockfighting is not legal.
So Representative, let me ask you, and I told you I was I had a question of my own, and this is a sincere question.
You bet.
Why do people enjoy watching animals fight?
Oh, I think if you've ever watched, and I can answer that simply. Have you ever been to a boxing match? Because I love boxing. Why
No,
do
I
people
haven't.
like to? Well, I have. And here's what's funny. You may not believe this. I've not been to a chicken fight, never in my life. Grew up all around it, could have went, can still go if I want to. I love boxing. I love bare knuckle fighting. I watch a lot of bare knuckle fighting. So the same thing is it's a sport. It is something that people like to bet on, like to watch. No different than two guys getting in a ring and trying to tear each other's head off. I'd say no different. They come out bruised, cut up, beat up, bruised up. And
Well,
again, if you look at football, same thing.
Well, that is a free choice issue for a human, but let me ask you, would you go to a cockfight since you're sponsoring this bill to see what it's all about?
Yeah, I've actually been invited to come down to Puerto Rico because a lot of Puerto Rico's whole government income comes from chicken fighting, and they have about 11,000 people employed in that. And so they've asked me to come down because they're big supporters of this. And so I've agreed that probably at some time I'll go down there. I would have no problem going to a chicken fight. And again, this is for me is about freedom. It's about the right to choose. It's about having my liberties and letting me choose what I'm going to do and not the federal government. So that's probably my biggest, I'm a big proponent of, that we don't need the government in our business on everything. And so that's one of the biggest stance I have.
Well, Representative Humphrey's bill is going to guarantee the federal government's involvement because the feds make it a crime to possess animals for fighting, to ship animals for fighting. So if you weaken the state law so much that it's completely unenforceable, you'll have more federal involvement. But let me just say, boxing is a legal sport. The people are volunteers. They're making money doing this. They have gloves on to mute the effects of the punches. These animals, whether they're dogs in a fight or birds in a fight, have no choice. They're conscripted. And in the case of the birds, each fight is defined by the type of weapon that's affixed to the bird's leg. So it's either a short knife fight, a long knife fight, or a gaff fight. I've been to cockfights, and more as an investigator. The fights last typically for 2 or 3 or 4 minutes. Sometimes if the fight goes on, they put them over in a drag pit. They go through hundreds of birds potentially at a night of fights, and it's all criminal. It's all illegal. We have fighters in Oklahoma, in Atoka County, where Representative Humphrey represents. There's an illegal pit that's operating in Straighttown. We know about it. We've given information to the sheriff. He is sworn to uphold the laws of Oklahoma. We don't have our sheriffs pick and choose which laws they're supposed to enforce. They're the laws. You don't have to agree with every law. This is illegal. And if Representative Humphrey wants to do a bill, it's his right as an elected official, but we should debate it. And I just don't think that more than a handful of Oklahomans think it's okay to stage fights between animals.
Hey,
That's
I'd
not a
like to
rural
answer.
value.
I'd like to answer that illegal pit, because everything that I've seen that they've introduced to the sheriff has been drones, which are illegal to fly over, which is funny that they're trying to use illegal means to catch somebody doing illegal, which is way serious, an invasion of privacy. But here's the thing, the drones that I've seen fly over have captured vehicles in front of a barn or around a barn with some trailers. If you want to fly over my house, I got 13 vehicles, 4 trailers out there. Just because there's trailers and vehicles at a house don't mean they're cockfighting. I don't have a ticket on my place. And then they take pictures of people driving down the highway and say, oh, this is all those leaving who got informed. And you don't even know that it's the same highway. So they don't have the evidence for the sheriff to go out. There's a thing called probable cause.
We didn't do the drones. We didn't do the drones, Representative Humphrey, but Bryan County right next door did get raided. There was a cockfighting arena there. And we've got evidence. We've got videos that the cockfighters have made themselves that they're shipping birds to the Philippines, Mexico, Guam. That's a crime. You decriminalize fighting in Oklahoma, it doesn't make it legal to ship the birds to the Philippines. It's a federal felony. I'll give you all the evidence to show the illegal activity that's going on now. And whether you're for cockfighting or against it, we have the rule of law in society. We have a rule of law. These people are violating the law. There's no ambiguity about what the prohibitions stipulate. You're not to stage fights. You're not to possess animals for fighting. You're not to attend a fight. You're not to ship birds across the world for fights.
Let me ask you, I'm sorry, Mr. Pacelli, go ahead.
No,
I was going to ask, does your bill address exportation?
Here's the deal. It's great that he's talking about that, because if you go and look, I believe the majority of birds that are being shipped overseas are not even roosters, they're hens, and hens aren't to fight. So they're using them for breeding purposes. And so again, you have to establish that they are fighting. And so he's wanting to take out a huge market from Oklahoma raising birds and producing income for people, because he feels like that is a fighting. And again, you've got to be able to prove that they are fighting. You got to prove that's intent. Intent is very difficult to prove. And so again, I don't know what kind of evidence you've got, but I can tell you the evidence that I have seen and the evidence that have been taken to the people that I know are law enforcement people are nowhere close to reaching the levels of going in and doing a search or doing a raid. I know that they did raid the place at Durant, but it was what caused that was that the people was blocking the road, were very rude. And so the police got called, and while there, they what we call open plain sight doctrine, saw things, and they ended up raiding the place, and people were arrested. So I think
300 people, 300 people at a cockfighting arena. 300 people. 300 people at that cockfighting arena.
And they were arrested, and that's the sheriff. I know him personally. He did his job, and I know that all of these sheriffs.
But if there's other illegal
crime, there's all kinds of crimes. I just had several 50 head of cattle stolen, and those people have not been arrested. So I mean, if you want to talk about crime not being investigated and not being thoroughly done, and I don't want to blame that on our local sheriff. That was a state issue. The state people dropped the ball on that, but that's all over. I mean, I can show you all day long.
I know, but we're not really talking. You and I agree, Representative Humphrey, that if someone's stealing 50 cattle, they should be apprehended. But Absolutely. It seems like we disagree on whether people who are shipping male roosters for fighting after they win fights in the Philippines say my birds are the best fighters, and they ship them, that those people should be apprehended. You're suggesting that it's not appropriate to arrest these people, which is why you want to decriminalize it. I'm saying this is important
for breeding purposes, and if they're being used
the ratio is 10 to 1. The Guam birds are 2 cockfighters in Oklahoma who ship 5,000 birds. There are 10 roosters for every hen. We know that the people doing, one of them was arrested for cockfighting already. The other guy has been on Philippines TV talking about the great fighting abilities of his birds. and they're selling them to cockfighters in Guam. There's no mystery about this. These are cockfighters on both ends of the transaction. No one's going to buy a chicken for $2,000 to eat it. These are fighting animals.
If you had all that evidence and the feds are really interested as big as you say, how come they hadn't busted that?
I know. I'm upset about it too.
Scratching my head wondering about that one right there.
I'm upset about it too. You and I are both upset about that.
I'm glad we're ending this with everybody upset. That's great. Representative, we're out of time, but there is something I did want to clarify, and something.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to take the time to ask it. Should some laws be enforced and other laws not be enforced?
I don't think I think all laws should be enforced, but I can tell you this: you have discretion as an officer as to what you are going to enforce and what is big. And again, if you got people out committing domestic abuse, you got people out stealing cattle, you got people out stealing all kinds of equipment and things, where the public is going to be more incensed and not incensed over these others, then I think as an elected official, you're going to work where it best benefits you and work the crimes that are most important to the public you represent. And I think that's just good old fashioned common sense, a lot of that we've gotten away from over the years. But now that's what I'm going to say. And if I was sheriff, that's exactly how I would do my job. And again, if I had evidence, I would have to, whether I agree or disagree, I've arrested people that I really didn't want to arrest, that I felt like they were justified in some of the things they did. But that has to be worked out in the court. So that's not, again, that's in front of the court, in front of a judge. You got to know your place. And as a law enforcement officer, I do have discretion. But again, a lot of these, you have to let the court work that out.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Pacelli, I'll give you the last word.
The law was put in place by the people of Oklahoma. It's unambiguous. There's illegal activity happening. And there are a lot of people who want to demean animals, who say they're not important, they don't suffer, they don't feel pain. And I think the world is changing. And I think rural Oklahomans know animals. They know that responsible care of animals is important. We have Christian duties to care for animals. They're all part of God's creation. To fight them just for human amusement and gambling, which is also illegal, is wrong.
All right. I'd like to thank you both for your time. I know you're both busting with more to say.
Hey, Wayne, appreciate your stance, man. Disagree with you, but appreciate you coming on.
I think you should stay in touch. Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you. Look forward to talking with all of you. Take care now.
Good talk to y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.